Spock's father's Star Trek. The Next Generation appearance needed Captain Picard. When Mark Leonard Sarek finally stepped onto Star Trek, The Next Generation, it wasn't just a nostalgic cameo designed to make longtime fans point at the screen and whisper, "Hey, that's Spock's dad." It was something far more deliberate and far more necessary. The episode Sarek didn't simply bring back a legendary Vulcan. It placed him in direct emotional and philosophical orbit around Captain Jean-Luc Picard, and in doing so, proved that Picard was the only captain who could carry the weight of Sarek's final story. Because this wasn't a tale about legacy in the usual Star Trek sense. It wasn't about fathers and sons, or old heroes reminding us of past glories. It was about what happens when a culture built on emotional control confronts the inevitability of emotional collapse, and why Picard's empathy, restraint, and moral authority made him indispensable to telling that story. Sarek's return wasn't about Spock. At first glance, the idea of bringing Sarek into TNG seems like it should have revolved around Spock. Their relationship is one of the most iconic parent-child dynamics in Star Trek history, defined by disappointment, pride, and long emotional silences. But that's precisely why The Next Generation didn't go there. Spock isn't present in Sarek. He's not mentioned in emotional terms. There's no attempt to reopen old wounds or relitigate their estrangement. Instead, the episode makes a bold and quietly brilliant choice. It removes Spock from the equation entirely. Why? Because this story isn't about unfinished business. It's about endings. Sarek is not a proud Vulcan diplomat at the height of his power anymore. He is an aging figure confronting Bendy syndrome, a degenerative condition that causes uncontrollable emotions in Vulcans. For a species that has devoted itself to logic for centuries, this isn't just an illness, it's an existential nightmare. Spock's presence would have reframed the story as a personal reckoning. Picard's presence reframes it as a philosophical one. Why Captain Picard was essential? Captain Picard isn't merely the commanding officer of the Enterprise D. He is the franchise's most articulate embodiment of restraint, civility, and emotional discipline. Like Sarek, Picard believes in control, not repression, but mastery. He values reasoned debate over instinct, diplomacy over violence, and reflection over impulse. That shared worldview is the foundation of the episode. Sarek doesn't respect Picard because he commands a starship. He respects him because Picard represents a kind of human volcanism, an evolved humanity that chooses reason without needing it biologically imposed. That's why Sarek requests Picard specifically to host his final diplomatic mission. And that's why what happens next hits as hard as it does. When Sarek's emotional instability begins to surface, it isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. His volatile emotions threaten an entire interstellar treaty. The stakes are galactic, but the conflict is deeply internal. Picard is the only character in TNG who could believably absorb that weight without melodrama. The mind meld that redefined Picard. The episode's turning point, the mind meld between Sarek and Picard, is one of The Next Generation's most quietly devastating moments. This isn't a flashy science fiction device. It's a burden transfer. Sarek, facing the humiliation of emotional collapse in public, asks Picard to temporarily carry his emotions so he can complete his mission. The request alone is extraordinary. Vulcans do not ask humans to share their inner lives. Sarek does because he knows Picard can endure it. And endure it he does, barely. Patrick Stewart's performance during and after the mind meld is a masterclass in controlled unraveling. Picard doesn't rant or scream. He trembles. His voice cracks. His carefully maintained composure fractures just enough to let the audience feel the sheer intensity of Sarek's suppressed emotional lifetime. This moment works because Picard has spent seasons proving how tightly he holds himself together. Seeing that discipline overwhelmed doesn't diminish him, it elevates him. A lesser captain would have made the scene about personal anguish. Picard makes it about responsibility, a mirror of what Picard could become. Sarek's condition functions as more than a plot device, it's a warning. Picard is a man defined by control. He suppresses romantic longing, defers personal happiness, and carries the moral weight of command with near monastic devotion. In Sarek, Picard sees what a lifetime of emotional containment can cost. This is where the episode quietly deepens Picard's arc. Unlike Kirk, whose emotional expression was often celebrated, Picard's era of Star Trek grapples with the long-term consequences of restraint. Sarek is not condemned for his logic. but neither is it presented as flawless. His illness reveals the danger of never allowing oneself emotional release. Picard survives the mind meld, but he doesn't shrug it off. The experience lingers. It humanizes him further, adding complexity to a character sometimes criticized as aloof in early seasons. Sarek didn't just need Picard to finish his mission. Picard needed Sarek to glimpse his own future. Why this couldn't have happened on the original series? It's tempting to imagine how this story might have played out with Captain Kirk instead of Picard. But that comparison only highlights why TNG was the right place for Sarek's final chapter. Kirk's leadership was driven by instinct and emotion. His clashes with Spock often centered on the tension between feeling and logic. That dynamic was perfect for its time, but it would have undermined the tragedy of bendy eye syndrome. Picard doesn't argue with Sarek's values. He shares them. That shared respect allows the episode to explore emotional collapse without framing it as a moral failure. Sarek isn't wrong for having emotions. He's tragic because he never learned how to live with them. Only the next generation, with its emphasis on introspection, diplomacy, and psychological nuance, could tell that story honestly.